The Saurian Empire sealed its fate the day it destroyed Earth. Now, 500,000 years later, a hidden human fleet has returned for blood-soaked vengeance. Sirens blare and explosions thundered across the void as Admiral Adam Hicks' warships burst from the shadows, ambushing a Saurian convoy. Hicks gripped the command console, his eyes cold as he watched the first enemy ships shatter under the onslaught. "No survivors," he ordered. "Leave none alive." His crew obeyed without hesitation, pummeling the Saurian vessels until only drifting wreckage remained. For Hicks and every human in his fleet, this was but the first strike in a war 500,000 years in the making. Earth, humanity's cradle, once teemed with life. Then the Saurians came. Without warning or mercy, the alien empire's dreadnoughts darkened the skies, raining destruction until the planet lay in ruins. Billions perished in the flames. But some few escaped. Just before the final orbital bombardment scoured Earth clean of life, a lone fleet of prototype ships slipped away, carrying a precious cargo, the last surviving humans. Among them was Hicks, then a young officer, his heart shattered by the slaughter of his species. In the centuries since, that ragtag fleet has grown into a potent armada, bound by oaths of retribution. Entire generations lived and died aboard those ships, every waking moment devoted to a single cause: vengeance against the Saurians. Human scientists and engineers developed radical technologies and terrifying new weapons for the coming war. Now, watching the Saurian convoy burn, Hicks allowed himself a grim smile. After 500,000 years, the reckoning had finally begun. "This is only the first blow," he told his officers. "The Saurians control a galactic empire spanning 1,000 worlds. Defeating them will require more than a few skirmishes." Hicks outlined his audacious plan to systematically dismantle the Saurian Empire by striking at critical targets, shipyards, industrial hubs, command centers, dealing enough damage to cripple their economy and military while sapping their will to fight. It was a breathtakingly ambitious scheme. Even with their advanced tech and fanatical resolve, Hicks knew his fleet faced steep odds against the Saurians' overwhelming numbers. Speed, guile, and surprise would be their greatest weapons. And if some humans must die to see Earth avenged, so be it. The survival of their species, the rebirth of their civilization, demanded nothing less. As his ships set course for their next target, a major Saurian orbital dry dock, Hicks weighed the burden of command, and the price his people must pay in blood. The war to come would be long and brutal. But the humans would have their revenge, or perish in the attempt. For those who witnessed the death of Earth, no other choice remained. The jump to the Saurian shipyard was brief, the human fleet emerging from the void with weapons primed. Admiral Hicks wasted no time giving the order to attack. His ships surged forward, a vengeful tide of metal and fire. The shipyard hung in space, a sprawling complex of docks, scaffolding, and half-built Saurian vessels. Swarms of defense platforms and warships moved to intercept the human attackers. Saurian guns thundered, filling the void with crisscrossing energy beams and missile contrails. Hicks's ships punched into the teeth of the defenses, their advanced shields shrugging off the worst of the barrage. The human weapons spoke back, a cacophony of railgun slugs and fusion warheads that scythed through the Saurian formations. "Target their power generators and dry docks," Hicks ordered, his voice cold. "Rip this place apart." The humans obeyed with relish. Precision shots struck the shipyard's reactor housings, the impacts sending gouts of flame and shattered metal spinning into the void. Dry docks shattered as human weapons found their marks, consigning half-built Saurian ships to oblivion. But the Saurians rallied swiftly. Reinforcements poured into the system, a tide of ships led by a massive dreadnought. Hicks recognized it instantly, the personal flagship of Admiral Laros, the Butcher of Earth. Laros's arrival galvanized the Saurian defense. The reinforcements slammed into the human fleet, trading fire at point-blank range. Hicks found his ships driven back, pressed on all sides by the weight of Saurian numbers. Amidst the chaos, Laros's dreadnought singled out Hicks's flagship. The two vessels squared off, trading earth-shattering broadsides. On the bridge, Hicks gripped the command console as his ship shuddered under the impacts. "You should have stayed dead." Laros's voice crackled over the comm, thick with contempt. "You only prolong your species' extinction." Hicks's reply was a wordless snarl. He ordered his crew to double their fire, pouring everything they had into Laros's flagship. Despite the battering, Hicks didn't relent in his attack on the shipyard. Bays on his ships yawned open, disgorging swarms of boarding pods. The pods punched through the shipyard's hull, disgorging elite human marines into the maze-like interior. Inside, the battle devolved into a brutal melee. Marines clashed with Saurian troops and defense drones in cramped corridors and cavernous assembly chambers. Weapons fire and screams echoed through the structure. The tide turned when the human saboteurs reached the shipyard's main reactor. They fought their way to the core, planting explosive charges. The Saurians realized the danger too late. "All units withdraw immediately," Hicks ordered across the comm. "Reactor core breach imminent." The human ships disengaged, fighting free of the Saurian kill zone. Hicks' flagship shook off Laros's dreadnought in a final exchange of fire, then jumped to safety. Moments later, the shipyard's reactor detonated. A miniature sun blossomed in the void, consuming the entire facility in an apocalyptic blast. Saurian ships too slow to flee were incinerated instantly. Aboard his battered flagship, Hicks allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had struck a heavy blow against the Saurian war machine. But the moment was short-lived. Damage reports flooded in, tallying the human ships lost or crippled in the fighting. Casualty lists began to populate on Hicks's display. Hundreds of his people killed or maimed in the assault. Hicks clenched his fists until his fingers tightened. The price of vengeance was high, but they would pay it 1,000 times over until the Saurians were nothing but ashes. Back at the fleet's hidden base, repairs and rearmament were already underway as Hicks met with his officers. Tense conversations filled the room as they pored over the battle data, seeking weaknesses to exploit in the next attack. "Laros will be hunting us now," Hicks said grimly. "We bloodied his nose today. He won't let that stand." The others nodded. They all knew the risks, the stakes. Earth's memory demanded nothing less. "We keep hitting them," Hicks continued. "Shipyards, fueling stations, command centers. We keep up the pressure until they break." There was steel in his voice, a cold fire in his eyes. The war had only just begun. The acrid stench of burnt circuitry filled the air as Admiral Hicks pored over intelligence reports streaming across his command console. His officers huddled around, faces grim in the dim light of the war room. "The Saurians are scrambling," Lieutenant Chen said, gesturing to a holographic map dotted with red icons. "They're reinforcing defenses across their key installations." Hicks nodded, eyes narrowing. "Good. They're scared. Time to hit them again while they're off balance." He zoomed in on a massive orbital structure, the Saurian naval base in the Arcturus system, a vital staging ground for their fleets. "There," Hicks said. "We take that out. We cripple their ability to respond to our attacks." The room erupted in a flurry of activity as Hicks outlined the assault plan. He handpicked his most advanced ships and veteran crews for the strike force. At the heart of the fleet was the Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful warship, dripping with experimental weapons developed over centuries of exile. As the human armada dropped out of FTL near Arcturus, alarms blared across the bridge of Hicks' flagship. "Multiple hostile contacts!" the sensor officer shouted. "It's a trap, sir!" A massive Saurian fleet materialized before them, led by the familiar silhouette of Admiral Laros's dreadnought. Hicks cursed under his breath. Laros had anticipated their move. "All ships, battle stations," Hicks ordered. "Prepare for—" His words were cut off as the void lit up with weapons fire. The Saurians unleashed a barrage unlike anything the humans had faced before. Energy beams lanced out, punching through shields that had shrugged off conventional weapons. "New weapon signatures detected," the tactical officer reported, voice tight with tension. "They've upgraded their arsenals." Hicks gripped his command chair as the ship rocked under repeated impacts. All around, human vessels found themselves on the defensive, struggling against the Saurians' technological edge. Through the chaos, Laros's dreadnought bore down on Hicks's flagship. The two Titans squared off, trading devastating volleys at point-blank range. Armor plates buckled and hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. "Sir, we can't take much more of this," the helmsman warned. For the first time, Hicks felt a twinge of doubt. Had he finally met his match in Laros? But even as the human fleet took heavy losses, they refused to yield. The Retribution's experimental weapons roared to life, carving through Saurian ships smoothly. Slowly, brutally, they fought their way through to the naval base. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command hub," Hicks ordered. The humans unleashed hell upon the Saurian installation. The Retribution's main gun, a gravitational singularity projector, tore vast chunks from the station's superstructure. Defense turrets and docking bays crumbled under the onslaught. Victory seemed within reach when Laros's voice crackled over the comms. "Enough, Hicks," the Saurian growled. "I have something you'll want to see." The main view screen flicked to life, revealing a sight that made Hicks's blood run cold. Dozens of human prisoners, haggard, broken figures in tattered uniforms. "Survivors from your fleet's rout centuries ago," Laros explained. "Surrender yourself, and I'll spare their lives." Hicks's crew turned to him, faces etched with anguish. He closed his eyes, the weight of command crushing down upon him. "No deal," he finally said, voice leaden. What followed would haunt Hicks for the rest of his days. Laros methodically executed the prisoners, broadcasting their deaths across every channel. The bridge crew wept openly, screaming curses at the Saurians. Hicks forced himself to watch every moment, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. When it was over, he gave the order to withdraw. As the battered human fleet limped away from Arcturus, leaving the ruined naval base behind, Hicks knew the war had entered a new phase. There would be no quarter given, no mercy shown. It would end only with the annihilation of one side or the other. Admiral Hicks stood before the holographic display, his face illuminated by the swirling galaxies and star systems. The room fell silent as he turned to address his top officers. "We can't keep trading punches with the Saurians," Hicks said, his voice low and urgent. "They've got us outgunned and outnumbered. We need a new strategy." Lieutenant Chen stepped forward, tapping at her datapad. "Sir, our intelligence indicates the Saurians have traced our attacks back to the Epsilon system. If they find our outpost there—" Hicks nodded grimly. "It's only a matter of time. We need to evacuate and destroy that base before Laros gets his claws on it." The officers huddled around the display as Hicks outlined his plan. A diversion assault on the Saurian colony of Kaura would draw Laros away, giving them time to evacuate the outpost. Hours later, the human fleet dropped out of FTL above Kaura. The planet's orbital defenses sprang to life, filling space with a web of energy beams and missiles. "All ships, concentrate fire on military targets," Hicks ordered from the bridge of his flagship. "Let's give them a show they won't forget." Human warships unleashed hell on the Saurian installations below. Fusion bombs cratered military bases while railgun slugs shattered orbital platforms. The Saurians responded with fury, their ships rising to meet the human assault. Meanwhile, light years away, Lieutenant Zara Emerson led her team of commandos into the secret human outpost. Alarms blared as automated defenses activated, filling corridors with laser fire. "Push forward!" Emerson shouted, ducking behind a bulkhead as security drones swarmed towards them. "We need to reach the control center." The commandos fought their way through the facility, securing critical areas as the evacuation began. Engineers raced to purge databanks and rig explosives, while Emerson's team held off waves of lethal drones. Back at Kaura, Hicks watched Laros's dreadnought materialize at the head of a massive Saurian armada. "All ships disengage and prepare for jump," Hicks ordered. "Let's hope Emerson's team is ready." The human fleet vanished in a flash of light, reappearing at the coordinates of their hidden outpost. They found a scene of chaos. The facility was already beginning to break apart as the charges detonated. "Emerson, status report," Hicks barked into the comm. "Evacuation complete, sir," came the reply. "We're coming in hot." As Laros's forces arrived in system, the human fleet sprang their trap. They used the expanding debris field from the destroyed outpost to mask their movements, catching the Saurians in a devastating crossfire. Caught off guard, Laros's ships took heavy damage before managing to disengage and retreat. Hicks allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction, but it was short-lived. "We've lost our primary resupply point," he told his assembled staff later. "We can't keep playing defense. It's time to take the fight to them." Hicks activated a holographic map of Saurian space. "I want options, people. How do we hit them where it hurts?" The officers leaned in, studying the display intently. The next phase of the war was about to begin. The holographic display flickered as Hicks and his officers scrutinized the intel reports. The Saurian throne world of Kraoth glowed at the center, surrounded by a web of defenses. "This summit is our chance," Hicks said, his voice low and intense. "We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we show the galaxy that humanity isn't finished yet." Lieutenant Chen zoomed in on the capital city. "Our window is narrow. Once the summit begins, security will be impenetrable." Hicks nodded, then turned to Lieutenant Zara Emerson. "You'll lead the ground team. Get in, plant the charges, and broadcast our message. This is a precision strike, not an invasion." Emerson's eyes hardened. "We'll get it done, sir." As the fleet dropped out of FTL near Kraoth, alarms blared across the bridge of Hicks's flagship. The void lit up with weapons fire as human ships unleashed a barrage on the orbital defenses. "All ships concentrate fire on those shipyards," Hicks ordered. "Draw their forces away from the insertion point." Through the chaos of battle, a small stealth ship slipped past the Saurian blockade. Inside, Emerson and her team readied their gear. "Entering atmosphere," the pilot reported. 30 seconds to drop." The ship shuddered as it plunged through Kraoth's sky. Emerson felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the bay doors opened, revealing the sprawling alien cityscape below. "Go, go, go!" she shouted. The commandos leapt out, activating grav chutes to slow their descent. They landed hard on a rooftop near the palace complex, immediately taking cover. "Move out," Emerson ordered. "Remember, we're on a timer." They fought their way through the streets, pulse rifles spitting blue fire at Saurian guards. The aliens' scaled hides offered little protection against the human weapons. Inside the palace, Emerson's tech specialist worked feverishly to hack into the communication systems. "I'm in," he reported. "Ready to broadcast on your mark." Emerson nodded, planting the final explosive charge. "Do it." Across Kraoth, screens flickered to life with Hicks's face. His voice rang out, fierce and uncompromising. "People of the Saurian Empire, hear me. I am Admiral Adam Hicks of the human race. For centuries, you've been told we were extinct. You were lied to. We survived, we endured, and now we've returned to reclaim our place in the galaxy." As the message played, Emerson and her team fought their way to the extraction point. Saurian reinforcements poured in, filling the air with plasma bolts. In orbit, Hicks prepared to withdraw his fleet when new contacts appeared on the sensors. "Sir, we're surrounded," the tactical officer shouted. "It's a trap." Hicks stared at the tactical display, his blood running cold as he saw the massive form of a Saurian planet killer emerge from hyperspace. "All ships prepare for immediate jump," he ordered, then hesitated. If they fled now, Emerson's team would be stranded, but staying meant almost certain destruction for the entire fleet. Hicks closed his eyes, the weight of command crushing down on him. The fate of humanity hung in the balance with no clear path to victory. Hicks's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the tactical display. The massive Saurian planet killer loomed before them, its weapon ports glowing with building energy. "All ships, disengage from the main fleet," Hicks barked. "Focus everything on that planet killer." The human fleet pivoted as one, engines flaring as they broke away from the Saurian armada. Fighters and bombers streaked ahead, their holds laden with experimental ordnance. "Let 'em have it," Hicks ordered. Space lit up as human ships unleashed their payload. Advanced torpedoes and antimatter warheads streaked towards the planet killer. Its point defenses opened up, filling the void with a web of energy beams. But there were too many targets. Explosions blossomed across the planet killer's hull as volley after volley found their mark. Armor plates buckled and twisted under the onslaught. On the bridge of the Retribution, alarms blared. "Sir, the planet killer is powering up its main gun!" the tactical officer shouted. Hicks leaned forward in his chair. "Hit them with the plasma beam, now!" The Retribution's experimental weapon surged to life. A lance of blindingly bright energy leapt forth, slicing through the planet killer's weakened forward shields. The beam carved a molten gash across the superweapon's prow. "Direct hit," the weapons officer crowed. "Their outer hull is breached." Hicks allowed himself a grim smile. "All ships, concentrate fire on those weak points. Tear that abomination apart." Human vessels swarmed around the wounded planet killer, pouring fire into the breach. Chunks of armor and internal structure peeled away, venting atmosphere and debris. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Laros snarled in frustration. "Pull back to defend Krath," he ordered. "We can't lose the planet." But Hicks ignored the retreating Saurian fleet, focused solely on finishing off the planet killer. "Keep firing," he commanded. "Don't let up until that thing is space dust." On the surface of Krath, Lieutenant Zara Emerson and her team fought for their lives. Saurian reinforcements had them pinned down in the ruins of what had once been an ornate government building. "Almost there," Emerson's tech specialist grunted, fingers flying over his portable terminal. "Just need another minute to finish the upload." Plasma bolts sizzled overhead as Emerson popped up to return fire. Her rifle spat rounds at the advancing Saurians, dropping 2 of the scaled aliens. "We don't have a minute," she snapped, "and work faster." A grenade arced through the air, landing near their position. Emerson dove, tackling the specialist to the ground as the explosion showered them with debris. "Upload complete," the specialist wheezed. "The data's out. Everyone will know what the Saurians did." Emerson nodded grimly, surveying their dwindling ammunition and the waves of enemies closing in. "All right, people. Looks like this is where we make our last stand. It's been an honor serving with you all." Her team shared grim looks, readying their weapons for one final push. But before they could leap into action, the ground shook violently. Brilliant flashes of light erupted all around them as precision orbital strikes rained down from above. The Saurian forces were vaporized in an instant. As the dust settled, Emerson heard the roar of engines. A human shuttle swooped down, bay doors opening. "Need a lift?" the pilot called out. Emerson and her battered team scrambled aboard, the shuttle rocketing skyward as the ruins of the Saurian capital burned below. Back in orbit, Hicks watched with satisfaction as the planet killer finally succumbed to the relentless human assault. The massive vessel broke apart, secondary explosions rippling through its skeletal remains. "Sir, we're picking up widespread transmissions across Saurian space," the comms officer reported. "It looks like the data we sent is spreading like wildfire." Hicks nodded. "Then it's time we made our exit. All ships prepare for jump. We've struck our blow. Now let's see how the Saurians handle the fallout." As the battered human fleet vanished into FTL, leaving the Kraath system behind, the first whispers of rebellion were already spreading across the Saurian Empire. The carefully constructed lies of centuries were crumbling, and with them, the foundations of Saurian dominance. In the weeks that followed, Hicks led his forces in a series of lightning raids against Saurian military targets. They struck shipyards, weapons depots, and command centers, always one step ahead of Laros's increasingly frantic attempts to respond. Reports flooded in of uprisings on Saurian-controlled worlds. Newly formed resistance cells, emboldened by the human success, launched their own attacks. The once mighty Saurian war machine found itself beset on all sides. Aboard his flagship, now constantly on the move to avoid Hicks's pursuit, Admiral Laros raged at his subordinates. "I want that human fleet found and destroyed," he roared. "I don't care what it takes." But his words rang hollow. More and more Saurian commanders were refusing to follow orders, unwilling to die for a cause built on deception. The cracks in the Empire's facade were widening, threatening to bring the entire structure crashing down. Admiral Hicks stood on the bridge of the Retribution, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Saurian Empire's once impenetrable defenses crumbled before him. He turned to his executive officer. "Deploy the strike teams," Hicks ordered. "Hit every major colony world simultaneously." On Kreshna, Colonel Nara Kaith crouched in the shadows of a massive industrial complex. Her team of human commandos and local resistance fighters spread out, weapons at the ready. "All units commence Operation Firestorm," Kaith whispered into her comm. Explosions rocked the night as precision strikes crippled key facilities. Kaith led the charge into the governor's palace, pulse rifles spitting blue fire. Saurian guards fell before the onslaught. They found the governor cowering in his chambers. Kaith yanked him to his feet. "You're going to tell your people the truth," she snarled. Minutes later, the governor's scaled face filled screens across the planet. His voice trembled as he spoke. "People of Kreshna, I have betrayed you. The Saurian Empire was built on lies." As the confession aired, Kaith's team sabotaged shipyards and factories. Smoke billowed into the sky as vital war material burned. In orbit, Hicks watched Saurian warships scramble to contain the spreading rebellion. His fleet pounced, catching the enemy vessels in devastating crossfires. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Laros raged at his subordinates. "Crush these insects," he roared. "I want every rebel world glassed." But his orders went unheeded. As the virus infected ship after ship, Saurian crew members turned on their officers. Hicks received the report with grim satisfaction. "Prepare boarding parties," he commanded. "We're taking those ships." Human engineers swarmed over captured Saurian vessels, repurposing them for the growing armada. Hicks toured a newly acquired dreadnought, marveling at its firepower. "Sir," his aide interrupted, "we're receiving transmissions from the Saurian High Command. They're requesting a ceasefire." Hicks's eyes hardened. "No quarter," he said, "not after what they've done. Set course for Kronal. We end this now." The human fleet dropped out of FTL above the Saurian throne world. Laros's remaining loyalists formed a defensive line, a pitiful shadow of their former might. "All ships, engage at will," Hicks ordered. "Push through to the planet." Space lit up with weapons fire as the final battle for the fate of two civilizations began. The void above Kronal erupted in a storm of light and fire. Admiral Hicks stood on the bridge of the Retribution, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as the last remnants of the Saurian fleet moved to intercept. "All ships, execute Plan Omega," Hicks ordered. "Transmit the captured codes." The human fleet surged forward, slipping past the outer defense grids as if they weren't there. Saurian operators stared in disbelief as their systems registered the incoming vessels as friendly. "We're through," Hicks's tactical officer reported. "Weapons free." The Retribution's guns roared to life, spitting streams of hypervelocity rounds at the orbital shipyards. Structures buckled and shattered under the onslaught, venting atmosphere and debris into space. On the planet's surface, Lieutenant Zara Emerson and her team huddled in the cargo bay of their stealth dropship. The vessel shuddered as it plunged through Kronal's atmosphere. 30 seconds to touchdown," the pilot called out. Emerson checked her gear one last time. "Remember, we hit fast and hard. No hesitation." The dropship's bay doors opened, revealing a hellscape of burning buildings and smoke-choked streets. Emerson and her team rappelled down, boots hitting scorched pavement. "Move out," she ordered. "The palace is 2 clicks north." They sprinted through the ruins, pulse rifles at the ready. A pair of Saurian guards rounded a corner, scales gleaming in the firelight. Emerson dropped to one knee, her weapon spitting blue fire. The aliens fell without a sound. In orbit, Admiral Laros snarled as he watched his defenses crumble. "Launch all fighters," he barked. "Activate the surface batteries." Space filled with swarms of Saurian craft, darting and weaving in complex patterns. Plasma beams lanced up from the planet's surface, scoring hits on several human vessels. Hicks gripped the arms of his command chair as the Retribution rocked from a near miss. "Bring us about," he ordered. "Target Laros's flagship." The two warships squared off, trading salvos of devastating firepower. Hicks leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Prepare the interdiction missiles," he commanded. "Wait for my mark." On the ground, Emerson's team fought their way through the lower levels of the Imperial Palace. Automated turrets sprang to life, filling the corridors with deadly energy bolts. "Take cover!" Emerson shouted, diving behind a fallen pillar. She lobbed a grenade, the explosion silencing the nearest defenses. They pressed on, engaging in vicious close-quarters combat with Saurian elite guards. Emerson's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, drawing her sidearm in one fluid motion. Two more Saurians fell to precision headshots. "This way," her tech specialist called out, gesturing to a heavily armored door. The command bunker should be just beyond. In space, Hicks watched Laros's flagship list to one side, venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. "Now," he ordered, "fire the interdiction missiles." A salvo of sleek projectiles leapt from the Retribution's launch tubes. They phased through the enemy ship's shields, detonating inside its reactor core. The Saurian vessel went dark, drifting helplessly. Hicks opened a comm channel. "Admiral Laros, your fleet is in ruins. Surrender now, and I'll spare what's left of your forces." Silence answered him. Then, impossibly, the Saurian flagship's engines flared to life. It turned ponderously, accelerating on a collision course with the Retribution. Hicks's lips tightened. "So be it," he muttered. "All batteries, open fire, take that ship apart." The Retribution unleashed its full arsenal. Laser beams sliced through armor plating. Railgun rounds punched clean through the vessel's hull. Explosions rippled along its length as internal systems overloaded and detonated. What remained of Laros's flagship drifted apart in pieces, the Saurian admiral's suicidal gambit ending in failure. In the palace command bunker, Emerson stood over the captured members of the Saurian High Council. The Supreme Overlord glared up at her, scales dripping with impotent rage. "It's over," Emerson said. "Order your forces to stand down." "Never," the Overlord spat. "We will fight to the last." His words cut off as Emerson's fist connected with his jaw. The alien slumped to the floor, unconscious. "Anyone else want to be difficult?" Emerson asked, looking at the other captured council members. They remained silent. Emerson tapped her comm unit. "Admiral Hicks, this is ground team. We have them. The Saurian leadership is in custody." High above, Hicks allowed himself a grim smile. He opened a broadcast channel to every ship and comm system in range. "This is Admiral Adam Hicks of the human race," he began. "The war is over. The Saurian Empire has fallen. To all surviving Imperial forces, stand down immediately or be destroyed. There will be no further warnings." Hicks paused, watching as the remaining Saurian ships powered down their weapons. Fires still raged across the surface of Kronal, a stark reminder of the cost of victory. "Let this day mark the end of Saurian dominance," Hicks continued, "and the beginning of humanity's return to the stars." The smoldering ruins of Kronal cast long shadows as Admiral Hicks strode through the debris-strewn streets. Smoke hung thick in the air, acrid and choking. Human soldiers moved with purpose, rounding up dazed Saurian survivors. "Status report," Hicks barked into his comm unit. "Sir, we've secured the primary shipyards and weapons facilities," his XO replied. "Resistance has crumbled. The last Saurian cruiser just surrendered in orbit." Hicks nodded, satisfaction etched on his weathered face. "Excellent. Begin processing the prisoners immediately." He watched as a line of captured Saurian soldiers shuffled past, scales dull with ash and defeat. Armed human guards prodded them towards hastily erected containment fields. In what remained of the Imperial Palace, Lieutenant Emerson circled the captive Supreme Overlord. The once mighty Saurian leader cowered on the floor, stripped of his ornate regalia. "You will confess your crimes," Emerson said, voice cold as steel. "Every atrocity, every lie. The galaxy will know the truth. The Overlord's eyes darted nervously. And if I refuse? Emerson's lip curled. Then we'll start with your underlings, one by one, until someone talks. Your choice. Across conquered Saurian worlds, screens flickered to life. The battered face of the Supreme Overlord filled the frame, scales pale with fear. People of the Empire, he began, voice quavering, I come before you to confess our great sin. As the litany of Saurian crimes spilled forth, human soldiers tightened their grip on key installations. Governor Harrison, newly appointed to the Saurian colony of Vextal, addressed his troops. We rule here now, he declared. Any resistance will be crushed without mercy. Is that understood? A chorus of affirmatives rang out. In the distance, the distinctive crack of pulse rifles signaled the suppression of an attempted uprising. On Kronal, Hicks toured a captured weapons foundry. Human engineers swarmed over alien machinery, probing its secrets. How soon can we adapt this tech for our own use? Hicks asked. The lead scientist wiped sweat from her brow. We're making progress, sir. Give us a week, and we'll have the first prototypes ready. Hicks nodded. Good. Keep at it. In a makeshift interrogation center, Emerson loomed over a trembling Saurian officer. Tell me about your deep space outposts, she demanded. Every hidden base, every secret colony. The Saurian scales rippled with fear. I can't. Emerson leaned in close. Wrong answer. Outside, a crowd gathered. A line of Saurian collaborators stood before a hastily erected firing squad. The crack of rifles echoed across the ruined cityscape. In orbit, Hicks convened his war council aboard the Retribution. Holograms of his top commanders flickered around the table. The next phase begins now, Hicks declared. We'll scour every sector, root out every last pocket of resistance. He turned to Colonel Keith's hologram. You'll lead the push into the outer rim. Use whatever force necessary to secure those territories. Keith saluted crisply. Understood, sir. We'll crush any Saurian holdouts we find. As the meeting concluded, reports flooded in from across former Saurian space. Human Marines stormed a labor camp on Nexus Prime, freeing thousands of emaciated human prisoners. The liberated captives wept with joy, embracing their saviors. Footage of the rescue played on screens throughout human-controlled space. Cheering crowds filled the streets of reclaimed colonies, waving banners emblazoned with Hicks's face. In his quarters, Hicks reviewed plans for the new Imperial Armada. What had begun as a ragtag resistance was transforming into a disciplined war machine. Yet even as humanity's grip tightened, pockets of Saurian resistance festered in the darkest corners of the galaxy. In hidden bunkers and remote outposts, the remnants of the old guard plotted their revenge. On a distant moon, cloaked from prying eyes, a cadre of Saurian royalists gathered in secret. The humans grow complacent in their victory, hissed a scarred general. We will bide our time, gather our strength, and when the moment is right. The assembled Saurians raised their claws in salute. Death to the human usurpers! The ice winds of Nix-R howled across the frozen wasteland, carrying the stench of burned flesh and scorched metal. Colonel Keith's armored transport plowed through snowdrifts, its tracks grinding over shattered Saurian war machines. Contact left, her gunner shouted. The turret swiveled, spitting streams of hypervelocity rounds. A Saurian ambush team scattered, scales flashing blue-white against the snow. One alien warrior raised a plasma launcher, the weapon's muzzle glowing with deadly energy. Keith grabbed the emergency override. Evasive! The transport lurched sideways as a plasma bolt streaked past, melting a furrow in the ice. Return fire shredded the Saurian attacker, leaving a smear of alien gore on the pristine snowfield. Push forward, Keith ordered. We take that citadel today. Human assault teams swarmed from their transports, pulse rifles chattering in the thin air. Saurian defenders poured fire from fortified positions, energy beams carving steaming trenches in the permafrost. A human sergeant took a hit, his scream cut short as his suit froze solid. His squad mates dragged the icy corpse behind cover, faces grim behind polarized visors. Kaith's voice crackled over the comms. All units, concentrate fire on their shield generators. Breach teams, stand ready. Artillery thundered, lobbing high-explosive shells over the Saurian defenses. The Citadel's energy barriers flickered and died under the barrage. "Now!" Kaith shouted. "Go, go, go!" Human shock troops surged forward, breaching charges slung across their backs. They slammed the devices onto the Citadel's main gates, diving clear as the explosions rang out. Kaith led the charge through the smoking rubble, her assault rifle sweeping left and right. Saurian bodies littered the ground, some still twitching as life fluids leaked onto the icy floor. "Clear these rooms," she ordered. "I want every inch of this place secured." Her troops fanned out, engaging in vicious close-quarters combat. The clash of steel on chitinous armor echoed through ancient stone corridors. Kaith fought her way deeper into the complex, following the sound of inhuman shrieks. She kicked down a heavy door, revealing a nightmarish laboratory. Frozen human corpses hung suspended in tubes filled with viscous fluid. Surgical implements lay scattered on blood-stained tables. The stench of death and chemical preservatives assaulted her nostrils. "Oh God," Kaith whispered, bile rising in her throat. She activated her suit's recording systems, methodically documenting the horrors before her. These atrocities would not go unanswered. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Hicks watched the footage with cold fury etched on his face. "No more half measures," he growled. "Hunt down every last Saurian loyalist. No surrender, no mercy." Across human-controlled space, the gears of war ground into motion once more. Supply convoys streamed toward the front lines, laden with weapons and resources for the renewed offensive. On Corvin 5, alarms blared through the mining colony's corridors. Private Jenkins sprinted to his post, heart pounding as he saw the swarm of Saurian dropships descending from orbit. "They're everywhere!" another soldier shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Jenkins raised his rifle, squeezing off shots at the first wave of Saurian shock troops. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head, scorching the wall behind him. The human defenders fought desperately, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Jenkins watched in horror as his comrades fell one by one, cut down by alien weapons or dragged away screaming. A massive Saurian warrior loomed over him, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Jenkins closed his eyes, waiting for the killing blow. Instead, rough hands seized him, clamping restraints around his wrists. He was hauled to his feet, stumbling as he was forced toward a waiting dropship. "Move, human filth," a Saurian voice hissed. "The Primarch has plans for you." Aboard the Retribution, Hicks paced the bridge, fury radiating from every pore. "How did we lose Corvin 5? He demanded. His XO's face was ashen. "Sir, the Purge fleet struck without warning. They overwhelmed the garrison before we could respond." Hicks smacked his fist on a console. "Unacceptable. Plot an intercept course. We're getting our people back." The human armada surged into FTL, racing to catch the fleeing Saurian ships. They dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Dragus Nebula, sensors straining to penetrate the swirling clouds of cosmic dust. "Contact!" the tactical officer shouted. "Multiple Saurian signatures bearing 047. Hicks leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "All ships, battle formation Delta. Engage at will." Space lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Human cruisers traded salvos with Saurian battleships, while swarms of fighters dueled amid the nebula's treacherous currents. On the Retribution's bridge, alarms blared as a Saurian dreadnought emerged from the dust clouds. "Evasive maneuvers!" Hicks shouted. The massive warship shuddered as enemy fire slammed into its shields. Hicks gripped his command chair, watching the tactical display as more Saurian ships appeared from hidden positions in the nebula. It's a trap, he realized, cold dread settling in his gut. Before he could order a retreat, the ship's systems began to flicker and fail. Hicks watched in helpless rage as his mighty fleet descended into chaos, easy prey for the circling Saurian predators. With options dwindling and disaster looming, Hicks faced an impossible choice. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, awaiting his next command.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.